So I worked 2 shifts again this past weekend, and there are certain doors in the barn that I can't lock even if I want to, so I just have to be extra cautious about it. One of those nights, I got there early in hope of maybe getting off before midnight. That being said, I was the only one there for a little bit. I went out to the big barn to get the first pen of milking cows. I just remember feeling uneasy all over. It might have been just me being paranoid given the previous situation. Well, that night I thought someone was lurking in the pasture in which we had the heifers in earlier. I couldn't see because it was dark, but I saw that familiar smile with the little light I had coming from my silos. But I figured I was hallucinating, being a little skittish, so I brushed it off and went into the barn. I almost had the whole first pen to the pillar when my coworker showed up. We continued the night as usual, and then I had to go start the pasteurizer. Of course, I didn't want to, but I had to. I went in there and the calves seemed fine. Everything seemed perfect. I looked around and everything was good. I went back to help milk the second pen. After that pen, I went to feed the calves while my coworker went to get the third pen like usual. Like I said, everything seemed fine. I was probably in there for around 20 minutes feeding the hutch calves, which typically takes longer, and then I went to the far pen where I saw the man the last time and everything was okay. Then I went to feed the middle pens, and that's when something didn't seem right. One of the calves was laying down and refused to get up to eat, so I hopped the fence and helped it. I turned around once. I got the calf up, and there he was. This time, he was standing and still smiling. I couldn't really see his face because it was covered, but he was still wearing the same clothes, which was weird, because it was 60-something degrees out that night. He wasn't very tall or very big, but just had a really creepy appearance and smile. He didn't say anything, he just smiled. I have a knife on me for work purposes, usually to cut baling twine. I was working with the same girl, and me and her literally locked ourselves into the break room again and called our boss. We got out there and we went to the calf barn again, and everything was just as I left it except one thing. The milk pail that had previously been filled to a mark on it was now empty, and the milk was all over the ground. My other coworkers started reporting things going missing, cows being moved, lights turning on and off, doors being left open, milkers being turned off. One even said that the man was sitting in one of the empty calf hutches, and they didn't realize it was a calf until they went to feed it, and he was just smiling at them. The cops had been notified, and we now have a cop parked by the barn every night, and one that stays in the area at all times. I don't know where he was, but this guy really creeps me out, and lately I've been turning down night shifts. The whole thing really just freaks me out, but I hate being afraid to go to work. So to the guy who keeps showing up in my calf barn, please never come back, and let's never ever officially meet. So a bit of backstory here. Not sure if this matters, but at the time of the incident, about 6 months ago, I was 21. I worked the evening shift and usually make it off around 11:30 p.m. After leaving the parking lot of my job, I take a right, then an immediate left at the light about 300 feet up the road to go home. On this particular night, everything seemed normal. As I pulled up to the red light in the left-hand turning lane, this intersection is a block away from my very large university, so it is usually pretty busy. This night was no different. Now, I wasn't the only car waiting at the light. There were 2 turning lanes, and there was a car directly to my right, also waiting for the light. As this light tends to be a particularly long one, I began browsing through various apps on my phone. I suddenly hear a familiar sound from the rear passenger side of my car, that little thump when someone pulls the handle of the door. I immediately whip my head around to see a man peering into my window, still attempting to open my locked door with a wide grin on his face. He appeared to be in his mid to late 30s, was balding and wearing a tattered wife-beater tank top. Sorry for the crude name, I just don't know what else they call it. His teeth were cracked and yellow, apparently from drug use. I immediately stomped on the accelerator and run the red light. I see him in the rear view mirror, just standing there, staring at my car. I called my best friend, who I also happened to work with. She was working the night shift from 11 to 7, and I told her to inform our supervisor. The supervisor called the police, who then ended up contacting me for a statement. I described the man as best as I could, but I only saw him for a few seconds. I never heard back, so I'm assuming he was never found. After this, I never leave work without walking out with one of the other girls. I am so grateful that my car doors automatically lock when the car is put in drive. Otherwise, he might have actually gotten in. The thing that still bothers me is that I know there was another car right next to me. They had to have seen what was happening, maybe even saw the guy walk up, but made no attempt to help me. One day we started the chat on Twitter. Can't remember how it started, but we kinda just got along. I was the type of girl who sometimes went flirty with guys without any sexual attraction. I did that just because I could, so it wasn't weird that I became flirty every now and then with him. One day he asked me to hang out, but I wasn't the type of person who liked to go out, especially with a guy I wasn't that close to, so I made excuses. He kept responding to every tweet I made, even though I wasn't responding. This gave me red flags, and I tried as best as I could to slowly cut off any contact from him. Sometimes he messaged me, which I quickly deleted without reading his messages, because they were just weird. A few months later, my roommate, her friend, and I went out for dinner in a small diner near our house. We were just talking while eating when out of nowhere, Daniel showed up and sat at a table in front of ours. He stared at me, and I remember thinking that was fucking awkward. But I played it cool and said hi to him from my table and asked if he was coming alone. He said his roommates weren't home, so he decided to eat out alone. Then, jokingly, I told him to get a girlfriend so he wouldn't have to eat alone anymore, and he laughed. He then flat out told me, "Nah, I want to have dinner with you." I just laughed it off and finished my dinner quickly, and asked my friends to head back home and said goodbye to Daniel. When we were home, I went to my room and checked my phone. I left my phone at home earlier. I never touched my phone while eating. We left the diner around 7 p.m., and I got this message from him stamped a little after 7 saying, "I want to have dinner with you." That was it. He officially just hit another level of creepiness, and I blocked him on every social media. Fast forward to 2 weeks later, I told a high school friend of mine about the incident with Daniel. She told me that back in high school, Daniel did the exact same thing to her and a few other girls, lots of juniors. Turned out every girl knew he was a creep. Now when I think about it, I just remember a middle school friend who was Daniel's neighbor had told me about Daniel chasing her and freaking her out when they were like in 8th grade or something. Recently I moved to an island in the South Pacific and had gotten the hiking bug, so I try to go out to the new locations as much as I possibly can. This happened about 2 weeks ago. Since I live in the South Pacific region, it gets pretty hot, driving all by the most insane hikers indoors, unless it's at night. Of course, I'm not a masochist, so I try to do all my hiking in the early hours of the morning or in the evening when it starts to get cooler. I've never been afraid of going hiking by myself. I did it when I lived in Oregon and never ran into any problems with it. But my island isn't my friendly home state. I always carry pepper spray. I got to the trailhead at about 6:30 in the evening. It was mostly just a straight walk down to the cliff and then a grueling journey back up. I didn't want to go, but my dog, Mad Moxie, needed to be walked, and I had done the hike so many times I could probably do it in my sleep. The first thing I noticed when I pulled up, an old rusty out blue pickup truck with a big plastic tarp over it, over the bed to keep out the rain. These are pretty common on this island, affectionately earning them the name. These are pretty common on the island. I didn't think much of it as I hooked up Moxie and started heading down to the trail, trying my best to ignore the mosquitoes that were making a meal out of my exposed neck. Heading down the trail was relatively easy, avoiding the banana spider webs. I felt the stress of my day slowly unwind as the underbrush grew darker and the night approached. I made it all the way down to the water's edge when I noticed a man standing about 100 yards away. It was dark enough now that I could only see his silhouette, so I have no idea if he was looking at me or at the water, but I chose to ignore him, and instead, after some time, the man started walking over to me and stopped, maybe about 10 feet away. "Evening," I greeted as he nodded and looked down at Moxie, who had just returned from running after the ball. I stooped down to pet her on her head as the man kept his eyes on my dog. "Can I help you, sir?" "Pretty dog," he responded mildly. "You are alone?" "I have my dog," I said lamely, trying to sound braver than I was feeling. "I'm never alone." I tried to emphasize on the fact that I had my dog with me, but the man seemed unfazed by my statement. "Oh, have a good night." With that, he turned around and started walking back towards the trailhead. I watched his shadow disappear into the trees and waited for about half an hour before I too started walking back towards the path, my mind on high alert. The crickets pierced the night as I climbed the steps. Illuminated by my flashlight, my hands were full of Moxie's leash. Finally, my light pierced the trees. When I got to the top, I nearly shat myself. The rusted blue pickup was sitting in the parking lot still, but their passenger side door was practically touching my car's driver's side. Inside the car, I could faintly see two men sitting in the cab, and I could feel them watching me. Slowly, I approached my car, walking as far over to the passenger side as I could and kept Moxie with me as close as I opened the door and crawled over to the driver's side. At the moment, the door of the pickup truck flew open and my dog started going apeshit, barking at the two people who were now outside their car and trying to break into mine. Heart in chest, I rammed the keys into the ignition and tore out of the parking lot so quickly, I nearly took my mirror off. I called my mom as soon as I got home and she begged me to call the police. Unfortunately, the police here on this island aren't as vigilant as they are on the mainland. Earlier this month, another girl actually disappeared from that area without a trace, and it makes me wonder if the men in the blue pickup truck had something to do with it. If I hadn't had Moxie with me, would I have been mugged or worse? If I learned anything from this experience, it's that please always take pepper spray with you, go hiking in groups, and always let someone know where you are going. It might save your life someday. And to the men in the pickup truck, let's never meet again.
Alright, if you enjoyed the video, go ahead, like, share, subscribe, share on Facebook, share on Twitter, share on Instagram. I don't give a shit where you share it, just share it. Thank you for watching.